Hi everyone and welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
I'm Nikki.
So we're going to start today by just thinking about which famous person would you love to meet and why?
For me, I'm pretty nerdy, so I would like to meet Noam Chomsky.
Okay.
He's a famous linguist.
Right, yeah, and kind of thinker, writer, all that sort of thing.
What about you?
Also authors. I would like to meet some of my favorite fantasy writers, people, Stephen Erickson, George R.R. Martin. If you're talking about people who aren't alive, yeah, I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with J.R.R. Tolkien. Obviously, he passed away many years ago, but yep, a lot of people like that, famous authors who I can say, give me some advice, teach me a few things that you know. Again, talking about people who've passed away, I would love to have been able to meet Sir Christopher Lee, the actor. Dracula, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars. Like more movies than anybody else has pretty much made. He's like a record holder, or was. Again, passed away a few years ago. But anyway, why are we talking about famous people? Let's read through day one of this article about how social media is shrinking the world.
Reading
6 degrees smaller. How social media is shrinking the world. Do you personally know President Tsai Ing-wen? Probably not, but perhaps you know someone who does, or someone who knows someone else who does. Maybe your friend's cousin went to college with a person whose sister works in the president's office. If you were to examine this web of social networks, you'd find we're more connected than we realize. This idea relates to a theory called the 6 degrees of separation. It suggests that there are, on average, just 6 links between you and any other person in the world. The number came from an experiment carried out by Stanley Milgram, a psychologist. He asked people to mail a package across the US. They were asked to send it via acquaintances to a final recipient they didn't know personally. The package passed through an average of 6 personal contacts before reaching its destination. Milgram's experiment took place in 1967. Nowadays, we're a lot more connected thanks to the internet, and by social media in particular. So, does the idea of 6 degrees of separation still hold true?
So, why were Nikki and I talking about famous people? Let's start the article and learn why. It says, do you personally know President Tsai Ing-wen?
No.
No, neither do I.
And the answer we give is, the article says, probably not, but perhaps you know someone who does. Or someone who knows someone else who does.
Right, so that's kind of confusing. You've got to think your way through that. But we do give an example of this in the next sentence. It says, maybe your friend's cousin went to college with a person whose sister works in the president's office.
That's a lot of connections to think about.
It can happen though, and it's actually more common than you think. The next part of the article says, if you were to examine this web of social networks, you'd find out we're more connected than we realize.
课文的意思是说，如果你去看这个社群网络的连结，那你就会发现我们彼此之间的关系其实比你想象中来得更密切。那这里的 if you were to do something, you would blah blah blah， 要注意这边的 would 是用 would 而不是用will， 但它表示的不是过去的意思，它就只是要用 would。那这里还有另外一个，就是意思是和现在事实相反的事件，也就是说，现在生活中不太可能会发生的一件事情，我们不太可能真的一个一个去问别人说，哦，你到底认识多少人？所以我们在什么样会用什么样的关系连接着？
So this is a hypothetical. It may not really happen, but it could if you really thought about who knows who knows who. Now in that sentence, we also saw the word connected. if two things are connected, they're linked in some way. There's something that connects them. That's the verb form. Or to use the noun form, they have a connection. For example, you could say, the lack of rain in this part of the country is connected to the poor harvest.
Connected 是形容词，指的是有关系的、有连结的。那它的动词是 connect，也就是说连结或者是相连。For example, we often say connect the dots, to mean that to bring or gather information together from different places.
Exactly, and you get the full picture. So what's this all about? Well, we see in the next paragraph that this idea of people and their connections, relates to a theory called the 6 degrees of separation. Something you might have heard of if you've been on the internet, and it's been around a while. It's a theory, and a theory is an idea. It's not been completely 100% proved as fact, though there may be some evidence that kind of supports it. A theory is intended to explain some facts or just something else about the world. The scientist could come up with a theory and then try to prove it. When they've done some tests, maybe they'll change the theory a little. Here's an example. Tom's theory is that people are born lucky or unlucky, and this never changes in their life.
Theory 指的是理论或是学说，通常并不完全代表它是100%正确，但是能够要说一个事情属于一个理论呢，那就要经过一连串的实验来证明说它是一个理论。那还有另外一个字叫做 hypothesis 假说。那当我们常常会有人搞混这两个字，如果我们要说一个东西是 hypothesis 的话，它是more like an assumption made before conducting any kinds of experiment. 也就是说，学者常常会先提出一个假说，然后呢觉得说是怎么样，然后之后再做这些实验，在这研究跟实验才会说它是一个 theory.So this theory we are talking about here is 6 degrees of separation.
So separation is the noun form of separate, which is when things are either apart, if you use the adjective separate, or are pulled apart using the verb separate. Separation indicates that two things are not together. There's a gap or a distance between them.If you're talking about a couple's separation, then they were together, but they've broken up. Kids have separation anxiety. They don't like to be taken away from or parted from their parents. Here's another example. The married couple went through a long separation before getting back together.
Separation 是名词，指的是分隔或者是分开，它的动词是 separate， 意思指的就是像是 divide 或者 split。就是 A 和 B 没有在一起的意思。那还有另外一个字是 segregation 或者是 segregate， 它指的也是分开或者是隔离。But this is more like people being separated from others because of their race, sex, or beliefs.
Yeah, it's often a negative word.
But what is this a theory trying to explain?
Yeah, the 6 degrees of separation. And as the article explains, so this theory, suggests that there are, on average, just 6 links between you and any other person in the world. We use the phrase on average here to mean that's the average number. Sometimes there are more, sometimes less, but when you add up the total number of links, divide them by the number of pairs of people, then you get the number 6 or just around it.
课文接着说，通常平均来说，我们和另一个陌生人的距离大概只有6层的连结。On average 指的就是平均来说，可能有些人是4层，那有些人7、8层，但是这个母体的算术平均数可能就是只有6层。
So what the theory is saying is that you can connect yourself to anyone by around 6 links from person to person.So,
what did this number come from? Where does this come from?
The article explains that the number came from an experiment carried out by Stanley Milgram, a psychologist. An experiment is a test or set of tests that are done to see if a theory or hypothesis is correct or just to see what happens when you try something. It could be in a science lab, like, what happens if we mix these two chemicals? What happens if we put this in high heat? The idea is you follow a detailed plan and see what happens and write down the results to learn more facts or just to see if it fits your theory. Here's an example of a science one. We have to put glasses and gloves on for this experiment as the chemicals can be dangerous.
Experiment 是名词，意思是实验或者是试验。通常我们在实验室里面做的那些都可以说是一种 experiment， 但是也不一定要是有什么专业的仪器才能做实验啦。像是你决定每天都要比平常更早睡1个小时，那看看1个月之后自己的精神会不会有什么改变，那这样也可以算是一种 experiment。例句说，我们做这个实验必须要戴眼镜和手套，因为这个化学物可能会很危险。
Right, and this was an experiment by a psychologist. A psychologist is someone who studies the human mind, the way our minds work, and the way we behave in particular situations.
Psychologist 指的是心理学家 ，someone who studies psychology。那还有另外一个字也很像，叫做 psychiatrist， 指的是精神科医生 ，a doctor that deals with mental diseases.
Right.
So what happens to this experiment?
Now, the article says this is Milgram, asked people to mail a package across the US.
So this is the first part. The next part is the article says they were asked to send the package via acquaintances to a final recipient that they didn't know personally.
Right. So the idea is they don't know who gets the package in the end. It's a stranger. They don't know this person. They can only send it via people they know. Via or via means the same as through or by way of. So they can't just go, okay, this goes to some guy in Boston in the US. I'll just send it to Boston and let somebody else do the work. You go, no, maybe I know somebody in the next state over who maybe knows somebody closer to Boston. I don't know anyone in Boston. So you have to kind of build that chain of people they know.
所以说大家呢，就是要透过一些认识的人来把这个包裹送到最后那个人手上。Via 是介系词，它指的就是经过或者是透过。And the people they must send the package to are acquaintances.
Exactly. An acquaintance is someone you know. You've met them. You know their first name and something about them. Maybe you work together or went to school together, or they're a family friend. It doesn't mean a close friend, someone you see a lot and hang out with, but you should know them reasonably well, and you could say, hey, I'm sending you a package, please send it on, and they wouldn't think, I don't know you, who are you? I'm not doing this. So here's an example. I was surprised and happy when an old acquaintance of mine started work at my company.
An acquaintance 指的就是一个你认识的人，可能是同一堂课的同学，或者是你健身房会打招呼的肌肉男，但是通常呢，指的不是你很好的朋友。例句说，我很开心，同时也很惊讶，当从前的一位老朋友开始在我们公司上班。
And the last person to get the package is the final recipient. A recipient, this is just a noun form for a person who receives something.
Recipient 指的就是接受者，在这边指的是这个收信的人或者是收包裹的人。So that was the plan for the experiment, but what happened?
Well, the article says the package passed through an average of 6 personal contacts before reaching its destination. To pass through means to go or move through something, but then continue on with the movement. So if it passes through, it doesn't stop.
Pass through 指的是经过或者是通过。那在课文这边呢，就是说要把这个包裹送到最后一个人的手里，通常会经过6层不同的连结。
And if you're paying attention, the context of this sentence should give you the meaning of the word destination. Of course, the destination is a place where a person or thing arrives at, like the final stop on a train journey or the place you fly to on a plane. In this case, we mean the address of the final recipient, or it just could mean the recipient themselves.
Destination 是名词，指的是目的地或者是终点。就可能你今天要去一家餐厅，你在 Google Map 上面输入之后，你走一走 ，Google 小姐就会告诉你 Your destination is on the left. So this is where we get the number 6.
Yes.
And the number for the 6 degrees of separation.
Exactly. And this experiment was done, and that's why we've got the idea. But the title of our article is 6 degrees smaller. Why? Well, the next part of the article says Milgram's experiment took place in 1967.
That was a long time ago.
Right.
So the world has changed a lot since then.
Of course.
The article says, nowadays, we are a lot more connected thanks to the internet and by social media in particular.
Exactly. Nowadays means these days. It's in the times and the days we are living in. Modern times, in other words. So we could say, I used to live in Banqiao, but nowadays I live in Taipei City.
Nowadays 指的是现今或者是如今，就是跟以前做对比。For example, nowadays children have their own smartphones.
Exactly. In that sentence, we also use the phrase thanks to the internet, thanks to social media. We use thanks to in this way to mean because of or due to. We're showing what is responsible for a particular effect or change.
Thanks to something or somebody 指的就是幸亏某人或者是由于某事的意思。那其实和 because of 的意思是大同小异的。
So the main idea of this paragraph is that the internet and social media have changed the world. And this leads us to the question, so does the idea of 6 degrees of separation still hold true? And this phrase, hold true, is just another way of saying remain or still be true.
所以说，在这个在1967年
Yes.
做的实验，现在来说不知道还是不是真的。Hold true 指的就是适用或者是有效，因为现在social media 社群媒体的缘故，我们跟另外一个陌生人之间，是不是说不定可能只剩下1-2层的连结了。
Yeah, are we still 6 connections away from anyone in the world now so many people have got the internet and social media? We will answer that question in day 2 of the article tomorrow, but now let's think about some of the ideas from today in our For You Chat question.
For You Chat.
So the question is, are you connected to any famous people in the way described in the article? Who are they and how are you linked to them?
I think we wouldn't really know if we truly are connected to famous people,
Well,
right?
we might if you like a friend and their cousin who works with something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I know personally, I kind of know a lot of singers in Taipei, Taiwan.
Oh, okay, that's
because
pretty
I used
good.
to go to like sing contests and stuff.
Right.
But what about you? Because you're living here. Do you know a lot of people?
I'm trying to think who I could be described as connected to. I'm connected through friends to, I guess, a bunch of actors. I don't know the famous ones myself, but I know their friends or maybe their sons or something through the acting community. There was somebody who worked here in this office maybe 5-7 years ago whose cousin is Hebei Tian from SHE, the Taiwanese singers.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I'm friends with a reasonably famous British author on Facebook, but that's because he kind of uses his Facebook page as his fans page.
Oh, so you can follow him.
Yeah, it's not quite the same as we know each other, we've met each other. So a few things like that. I could probably think up a bunch more. I know people who organize sports tours and they know some of the actual famous sports people who are on the sports teams. So there are those kind of connections too. And in that way, it's only really two or three links from me and, famous cricket or soccer players or something like that. So there you go. It's surprising how quickly you can connect to these people. And that's maybe because of the internet, but we'll find out if that's true tomorrow. Join us then for that. Bye for now.
Bye.
Vocabulary Review.
Connected. People are often very busy these days, so many use social media to stay connected with their friends and family. Theory. Space travel is becoming closer to reality, so there are now many theories about how humans could live on other planets. Separation. It is thought that children who experience separation from their parents could face greater difficulties in their lives. Experiment. Mike got hurt during a science experiment when he mixed too many dangerous chemicals together. Acquaintance. Jim made an acquaintance at a business event who was interested in buying his company's products. Nowadays. Nowadays, people often get their news from the internet, but in the past, people had to read newspapers.
字汇小补帖
Psychologist. Via. Recipient. Destination.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是www.english4u.net www.english4u.net